Welcome to the Stumbling Forward podcast. Progress isn't always linear, and it's rarely perfect, but it gets us where we need to be. I'm your host, Erika Taylor-Beck, the founder of Authentic Foundations, a business dedicated to creating online courses and one-on-one coaching to improve the way that we view and do leadership. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining another episode of Stumbling Forward. This is your host, Erika Taylor-Beck, and today I am really honored to have the opportunity to talk with Ash Weigand, or actually Ash, and you may know her better as Ash the Self-Healer on Instagram. Ash, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Erica. I'm super stoked to be here.
I am stoked to have you here. So Ashley is the first person I think that I have invited on that I didn't actually know personally, but I asked her to join because I found your content at a time that I needed it most. I thought it has resonated. I always felt like the messages were targeted. Even though I know it's for a collective, I always felt very much, wow, this feels right. So I was really, really honored that you said yes to recording with me today. And I'm excited to help, not that you need it, but to help share your message and a little bit about what you do, because I think it is incredibly powerful. With that said, do you want to share what you do? So I'm not being super cryptic about it.
Absolutely. Wow. I don't even know exactly how to put that into words. I feel like that's such a beautiful, loaded question, but I think to place it into, a very easy kind of text or an easy way to understand would be that I allow myself to be an open channel to channel forward the guidance and messages and wisdom that comes from what I believe is the infinite goddess, the great creatrix, and also from Mother Earth herself and from the ancestors that surround us in this world as well. And I channel forward that wisdom with the intention to spread into this world the infinite love and unconditional compassion of the goddess, of the great creatrix, of Mother Earth, to reignite the sacred flame of the goddess and the sacred feminine within the hearts of those who receive the messages that I'm called to channel, so that we can come together as a collective, as a society, to help heal Mother Earth and help bring her back into a place of harmony and balance and restore what has been broken and untethered and undone within society for thousands upon thousands of years through the rise of patriarchal control and the silencing of the sacred feminine energy of the world. So to put it into a short synopsis, I would say that that is my intention and that's my purpose of showing up every day to what I do.
That is a very long business card.
I love that. Absolutely.
You're right. It's hard to put into words what you do. And I know that you have evolved even since I have followed you and what you focus on. But I think it is insanely beautiful what you talk about with women and the power that they have in the community. And so I'm excited to get into that. But as I mentioned, this is something that you are focusing on now, but this hasn't been what you've always done. Can you talk a little bit about what your journey has been to get you to this point?
Wow, another beautifully loaded question. Whenever I'm answering this question, I always like to take a little bit to my origins, to my roots, as all of our stories originate from these beautiful roots that we start to begin to grow from within childhood. But my story, it started with divorced parents. My mother, she struggled with bipolar disorder, multiple personality disorder, anxiety, depression, and she herself really struggled with what I now believe in my heart, a lot of baggage that she was handed ancestrally as well through the conditioning of women and the suppression of the sacred feminine energy. And on my father's side, I grew up in confining circumstances with him and that side of my family being of the Mormon faith. So I grew up for 18 years of my life, half of the experience of those days, because I did move back and forth between households, but half of that experience I spent 18 years of my life in and out of the Mormon church and the Mormon faith, where not, only was I experiencing this wounded feminine energy on my mother's end, but I was also experiencing the actual patriarchal conditioning and suppression of women within the Mormon faith as well. In that faith, women are not allowed in places of power, as much organized religion is still to this day. Men hold the power. It's very patriarchal in that way. And so I grew up in that faith, being told what I could do, what I couldn't do, what I could wear, what I couldn't wear, who I could talk to, who I couldn't talk to, what I could eat, what I couldn't eat, the whole nine. And because of the circumstances that I experienced between those two households, I always felt at a very young age like I was living in this really confining box. And I think we all experience that in some way, shape, or form in our lives because of the conditioning and the programming that our society places on us. I've even remember at so many points going to my mom in the good times when there wasn't a lot of emotional, physical, or mental abuse, as was pretty normal in that household. But at some of the points when I would go to her and tell her, I just feel like I am living in a box, and I'm like 11 years old and saying this to her. And so I grew up in these circumstances that were just very suppressing, very confining, very detaching from myself. And, on top of that, because of the wounds that my mom suffered through as a parentified child is probably the best way to put it. I very much so was looked to by my mom to take care of her. I took care of my sister at a very young age because of my mom's wounds and her diseases. And I had to grow up really fast. I was forced into a box, disconnected from myself and from understanding what true unconditional love looked like as well too. But growing up through my teens and my early adulthood, because I felt so stuck in that box, I rebelled as much as I possibly could. I was the rebellious churchgoer child who turned to drugs, to boys, and to alcohol and the whole shebang, and was so disconnected from myself because of all of that. I adopted an eating disorder and entered into my early 20s from this so deeply disconnected from myself and from the world around me place. And I felt so lonely and at rock bottom. In my early 20s, at that point, was very reliant on alcohol to get me through the day. There was not one day out of the week that I did not going to work, coming home and drinking to an excess where it would black me out. So I didn't have to feel and experience the pain and the loneliness and the trauma that I, wasn't facing. So I spent my early 20s in that way and really felt like I was hitting such a low point with myself, and allowed myself to step into an abusive relationship at that point too, that really mirrored the abuse that I experienced in my early childhood with my mom, and didn't know that at the time, but now I do. And very much so hit rock bottom. And it was when I was between the ages of 22 and 23 that I had what I now view as my catalyst to my spiritual awakening, to reclamation of my power and who I am and how I feel my life should be lived. In 2017, my mom, growing up with the abuse that I suffered with her, it was lots of really tough things, and hard to hold things that she would say to me and my sister. She would always say to us, well, you're going to be sorry when I'm gone one day, when I off myself one day. And that was always a threat to keep us under her hand. And then between the ages of 22 and 23, that actually happened where I lost her to suicide. And it was at that point where I thought I was at rock bottom prior to that, but then I lost my mom and I was catapulted even further into the soils of rock bottom in a way that I could not have ever, understood that I would get there. So that experience, I call it my catalyst because it was very much so in that experience that I had this deep awakening moment in the deepest, darkest pits of my life. I experienced the most clarity that I think I've ever experienced to understand that if I didn't do something different, if I didn't try to find myself or reconnect to myself or change my life so that I could actually just live in presence in my life, that I would be heading down that same road that my mom had headed down. And that scared the hell out of me because I couldn't go down that road. And so it was from that point on that I devoted myself. For the first time in my life, I devoted myself to myself. And I had spent, most of my life in this people-pleasing, caring for others mentality because of how I grew up in the church and with my mom. And so the first time in my life, I took a hard look at myself and said, I want to forge a relationship with myself. I want to heal. I dove headfirst into spirituality. I dove headfirst into the podcast, the self-help books, mentors. And one of the things that I also dove headfirst into was exercise, reconnection with my body. And that led me down this beautiful path where I turned to competitive powerlifting to find my strength again, to find my power. And in that journey, I also found this passion that I have for helping women to reclaim their strength, helping women to reclaim their power. And I became a holistic women's competitive powerlifting coach. And so I took women to competitions and helped women find their power. And I just found this beautiful passion that I had for helping women remember who they truly are underneath of all of the conditioning that society places on us to say that we are powerless as women. I helped women to find their strength and their power, but that didn't entirely feel right because in competitive powerlifting, while it's a sport that connects you to your body and bridges that connection back into reclaiming power and strength of the body, it's also a sport that very much tries to force and push in what I feel now and what I see now as some very intense ways. It pushes the boundaries of your body. And I saw women, coming into the gym and going into competitions, trying to push themselves, force themselves to do things that their bodies were just trying to say, hey, like, not now, or hey, I kind of need, I need a bit of a break and rest. And so I really saw in those circumstances and in that business the wounded, masculine aspect of society. I'm someone who believes that we all hold sacred feminine and sacred masculine energy within us, yin, the yang, the light, the dark, the sun, the moon. And it was that I was really seeing come to light the conditioning and the programming that had a hold over these women in relationship to their masculine energy, where they just felt like they constantly had to push and overcome and do, and they could never be enough. They were always pushing themselves further and further just to be enough, just to be worthy, to be seen, to receive recognition in who they are. That just didn't sit right with me. And it took another catalyst for me to really have this awakening moment when I was in that business to completely shut down my business after I'd been a competitive coach for years and years at that point. But I had a client who I took to national level competition. It was her first competition, and I took her to competition, and it was on her deadlifts attempts. In powerlifting, you have a squat, a bench, a deadlift attempt, and we were second attempt of her deadlifts. And she walked out onto the platform. This is live televised powerlifting competition. She walked out onto the platform and she's trying to push her body past her limits. She picked up the deadlift bar and she stumbled backwards and takes the bar with her, and she falls backwards and she snaps her fibia right there on the stage, live recorded for the whole world to see. And it was in that moment, while I'm holding her on the stage and she's profusely crying and everybody's scrambling to get the medics there, that I chose that was not how I wanted to help women. It felt like I was just further helping patriarchal society and conditioning to help these women feel constantly like they weren't enough and they had to keep pushing for more and more and more. To finally be enough. So it was at that point that I realized there was a lot of healing in me that I had to do as well too, because I was also, participating in this. So it caused me to take a really hard look at myself and realize, how am I operating in that same belief of not being good enough and needing to force and to push. I took a step back from competitive powerlifting myself. I took a step back from that business, and I began this really beautiful sabbatical where I was fortunate enough to take a little bit of time off from work and to really dive deeply into healing what I, call my wounded masculine energy. Take a really hard look at where I felt like I wasn't good enough and why did I feel this way? And, why am I trying to push myself more and more and never, allowing myself to just feel good enough as I am and love myself as I am and be okay with who I am. So I dove into some healing surrounding that. And from that place, I realized that my entire life, because of conditioning and because of the traumatic experiences I experienced growing up, I was disconnected entirely from one half to the whole of who I am, my sacred feminine energy. That side of myself that, inherently loves myself regardless and knows my worth and my value and holds myself in reverence and compassion and grace. I recovered that energy and spent so long. And I firmly believe healing is cyclical and we never fully heal. It's just always evolutions to the journey and the process. But I took such a deep dive into healing my masculine, to reclaim my feminine, and to help once I brought my feminine online, helped that aspect of myself to further heal my masculine. It was through all of that, this is very long, that I came to understand that was what I was actually passionate about. That was what my purpose was in this life, was to help women understand that they always have been enough, to understand that they have never been broken, that society has just told them that they are broken and made them believe that they are not good enough as they are, when inherently just existing as the beautiful human that you are as a woman, that makes you perfectly good enough. So that's where I'm at now, and that's, the purpose of all of the work that I do.
Thank you for sharing that because there's a lot of really deep and personal and I'm sure emotional things that you shared. So
Yeah.
thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that because I know it's not easy, especially on more of a public forum, because you've gone through some major stuff and some of the core foundational relationships of your life that obviously paints how you view the rest of your relationships until or unless you decide to make those changes, which you did. You should give yourself credit and kudos for that because not
Yeah.
everybody does recognize it or listen to it. Even if you hear that call, they don't always follow it. I'm at a loss for words right now, but I love that you were strong enough to take it, considering all of the things that you had been through, to say, look, I need to make a change or I'm going to end up like my mom. And I want to help people, but this is not the way I want to do that. And now, having heard your story and seeing the persona that you share online, and I shared this with you before, it is very powerful. It is very warm. It's very loving. And you would not guess from talking to you or seeing you that you have been through so much darkness.
Thank
Thank you for sharing all of that. And you talked about at the end women needing to feel powerful and to be seen for who they are. And I just went through something towards the end of last week where, I started an entrepreneur business last November. I quit my 20-year corporate career and I wanted to build a business to help new managers and more tenured managers become better leaders through emotional intelligence and wanting to help set a really strong foundation because workplaces are not great places to be most of the time. And during the week, out of nowhere, and I'm a very even keeled person, very, very calm, very controlled. I have a ton of emotional intelligence and self awareness. And out of nowhere, I think maybe Thursday, I wanted to flip my desk, punch my
you.
monitors, and just, I was angry. I was frustrated. I have a pendulum that I keep at my desk, and I was checking in with myself and I was getting answers, but I was like, but what does that mean? I was so frustrated and I don't know where it came from, but I was like, I'm gonna burn this whole thing to the ground. I'm done. I can't do the podcast. I can't do this business. Maybe I should just go back to what I was doing before, but I don't want to do that. And once I
Yeah.
was able to settle, I realized that's not at all what I wanted, but I was struggling with the transition of going from wanting to stay safe and unseen and wanting to play small to now I have to be more public, I have to be more vocal, I have to be more out there. And that transition has been really hard because I had to come to terms with some wounds that I didn't realize that I had, that it's safer to play small. It is safer to not make waves. It is safer and it is more peaceful for everybody else. Your emotions make people uncomfortable. So don't have them. Don't express them. I was very independent, very self contained. I went through a theta healing experience last week, and just through some other things I've been doing, I think I was finally able to feel and heal some of those things, and they came out. And where are these coming from? But it felt so good. And I do think it was, I need to pivot from that to be able to start something new and to step into this new
Hmm.
timeline and new self. But and some of that is I don't have to work so hard to earn anything, my worth. If I'm not making money, I need to make sure that the house is clean and that I've cooked and I've cut the grass and I've done these things every day. I can't just have a day where I don't get something done. Why do I feel like I need to earn love, respect, my place in the family, the place in earth. And it all I think stems from a lot of this, that's kind of how we're raised. And it's so
Yeah.
sad because we don't realize that we're experiencing it most of the time.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, so many things came through me just now as you were speaking. And the first thing that I want to say is how proud of you I am for allowing yourself to experience all of that, for just sitting with yourself and letting it come up, because that is such an uncomfortable experience to have. It's so uncomfortable to meet those parts of yourself that have been suppressed, the anger, the unjustness, the sadness, the grieving. It's so uncomfortable to allow yourself to just sit there and let it wash over you and through you and let it be moved how it wants to be moved. But that is the healing. That is the work. It is so important. And I'm truly proud of you for allowing yourself to do that, because not only are you healing yourself, but you're healing the entire lineage of women that came before you that didn't know how to do that, didn't have the opportunity to do that. And also, you're setting the precedence for the women who experience your magic every day, and also those women that are going to be trailing this world after you in whatever way that looks like. It's so powerful that you allowed yourself to do that, but you're so right. It's so deeply embedded in us as women, these wounds to not allow ourselves to be seen because we've been conditioned to believe that it's safer for us to play it small and stay small, and these wounds of having to show up as this perfect version of yourself, or having to be perfect every day, proving your worth and on the go and proving yourself as being good enough. And this is what my Sacred Sisterhood community, Wisdom Weavers, is rooted in. This is the work that we're doing in this community, but I root my belief systems in these core feminine wounds that each of us as women hold, or, the feminine energy within us holds. And these core wounds, a couple of them that I really just came through for me as you were speaking is the witch wound, or that fear of being seen, the mother wound, needing to be perfect, can't sit down and rest, have to constantly be proving yourself and being good enough. And these wounds are so deeply embedded in the framework of our society because of the patriarchal conditioning that we as women have been forced into within society. And we've been taught that we don't deserve to stand as who we truly are. We've been taught that we have to prove ourselves. We've been taught that we have to seek through proving ourselves love, and that, we aren't inherently worthy of love. And so it causes us to overstep our boundaries and people please, to go down pathways in life that are totally out of alignment with the truth of our soul and the truth of who we are, because we're trying to prove ourselves or receive love. It forces us into relationships where we, one, can't express the truth of who we are and feel unsafe to do that, but we also are inherently trying to prove our worth to that person. It can force women into very narcissistic, abusive relationships. And there's so much to it. Truly, this conditioning and this wounding that the feminine energy in women hold because of all of this patriarchal conditioning and judgment and shaming and control of women. But the thing is that because we as women have moved through all of this wounding, we have suppressed so much. We've suppressed our truth. We've suppressed our needs, our wants, our authentic expression. We've suppressed our creative expression. We've suppressed our anger. We've suppressed so much. And I am such a firm believer, and this is a big part of what my belief systems, whenever I do a one-on-one with someone or hold space within my community, is based off of this core belief that all of that suppressed emotion that we didn't get the opportunity to express or have suppressed because of fear, that all of that gets stuck and held within our womb space as women, or if you want to call it your sacral chakra area, whatever you want to call it. But within that sacred space, it's this beautiful holding tank for all of that emotional suppression. It's also where our ancestral woundings are held, as well as all of the anger that all the women before us experienced in and of, the same that we are experiencing through our lives. It's all held within that space. But, the healing is to take all of what has been suppressed and to finally express it. And that expression, I found that when working with women, a lot of the time when you first allow yourself to step into that healing and to really open, I feel like the womb is also this Pandora's box. It's like when you finally allow yourself to open the doorway, open the lid to that box, that so much comes flooding out. And what's on top of the suppression of emotional expression that comes flooding out is a lot of anger. I call it sacred rage because it's sacred. There's a reason why we're rageful. There's a reason why we're angry. There's so much injustice that's occurred to us. We've been forced to be disconnected from our creative gifts, our power, our medicine as women. So this rage is sacred and it comes to the surface the first time you open that lid. It's so much anger. Like you said, you feel like you could just flip the table and kind of demolition your entire space. It's so true and it's so accurate. It's something that I've personally experienced so fiercely. What I firmly believe is that underneath of anger simply just rests grief. Grief for all the
Yes.
times that we as women did not get the opportunity to share our voice. Grief for all the times that we had our gifts suppressed. Grief for all the times that we didn't get to speak our truth or share our needs and our wants. Grief for all of the ancestors that came before us that were forced into being silenced, were shamed. Grief that for a couple millennium, if we trace the ley lines back to where these wounds really originated, where the separation from the feminine within women originated, it's truly just grief. That is the foundation of this anger. So when we allow ourselves to open up that box, open up the womb space, connect with ourselves within that space, our center of power as women is our womb, our sacral chakra. If whoever's listening doesn't hold a womb, but our center of power is the womb space. And when we open that up and let ourselves feel that anger, and we take that anger and we use it as the sacred rage that it is, and finally express what has been suppressed through our creative gifts, our voice, our medicine, through the embodiment of who we truly know ourselves to be and want ourselves to be, when we finally open that up and we express that, that's the healing. And that rage that came up for you, I can only feel that it was so sacred because it was underneath probably so much grief for one, not allowing yourself to in your life or felt like you've been held back in your life, from fully stepping into this version of yourself, and then all the fears and the doubts that rise that have been implanted in you. And it's kind of funny that you say this because this past week, past couple of days, I've been experiencing such similar things as well too, where I'm stepping into a lot of newness and I've had so much rage come up and so much grief and sadness and doubt and fear. And I feel like all of that's got to come up. We've got to touch on it. We've got to heal it. We've got to hold it. We've got to see it so that we can fully allow ourselves to step into the power that we have always held and that we're meant to wield in this life. So the synopsis, just so proud of you for allowing yourself to do that because like, again, that's the work. That's the healing. It truly is.
And thank you. Thank you for that. A couple of things that you said resonated. When I first started going through my spiritual awakening, I had Pippa Haywood on here recently, and she was kind of my magic coach, my spirituality coach. And one day we were doing chakra work, and we were going through visualization, and she was able to see them and said, like, your throat chakra is a little bit more dim. We're going to work on this to make it more open and more powerful. My heart chakra was massive. She said it's really bright, it's spinning, it's going. And we went through all of them, and later she emailed me and she said, I just realized I never talked about your sacral chakra because
Mm,
it didn't even register. And
yeah.
I had gone through sexual abuse as a child that I didn't remember. I
Mm,
had blocked it out until couple years ago. And I'm not mad about it now. I'm healed from that. But what was hard about that was that we never talked about it as a family. As I grew up, I had a situation in my early 20s that I spiraled out of control because my inner self recognized, hey, this is something that happened when you were a child, but no one talked about it. So I didn't know, and I couldn't understand why I was handling it so poorly. But I didn't know how to express rage, and I didn't want to make people uncomfortable because they were uncomfortable when I would be sad about sexual assault. So I learned to hold it internally, and I developed
mm,
really bad coping habits. I started drinking excessively. I was self-injuring and trying to figure out ways to feel it or to not feel it. It just depended on the day.
yeah.
And so as an adult, more recently, and hearing that and doing some of this work, it makes so much sense because that was shut down, and it was, we don't
Yeah.
talk about it, there is no rage. And I've never really been an angry person. I might be mad for maybe 5 minutes and I just walk away and I breathe and I'm fine, but it turns into internal sadness. I get frustrated and sad at myself, and like I internally combust essentially instead of
Yeah.
taking it outwardly. That's something that I'm healing from now too. And when you talked about that sacred rage, wow, what a powerful term. Because yes, it is. You are feeling the feels that you haven't felt for decades. And that
Yeah.
is insane to think about that.
Hmm.
And the grief too. There's a lot of grief in growing because you're shedding old selves and the life that you used to have and the life that you could have had if you had been healed sooner. This is what I could have been if I had known or I could have dealt with it. There is so much grief that comes up. I love what you had said about all of that because I know it's not just me. I know there are so many other people out there that are probably going through something similar, but not maybe knowing that they're going through it. And again, I didn't realize that this had happened until a couple years ago. And then I had to go back decades to heal something that little Erica experienced, and it totally changed the course of my life. But I had no idea about it until recently. Going back, it explains so much. And I'm able to look back at things and think, okay, now that I know through this new lens, this explains why I did this. This explains why I felt this way. This explains why I didn't do this. And so now that flipping my desk period the other day came out of nowhere. Nothing had happened. There was nothing that triggered it. I just felt so frustrated and angry and sad, and I cried and I felt overwhelmed and impatient. And none of these things are things I normally feel on a regular basis. And I could not explain them. But I do think that was healing, was look, it's okay to have these. Nothing bad is happening. And it was weird and it was uncomfortable, but it also felt so powerful afterwards because I was like, wow, nothing bad happened. I can do this openly and it'll be okay. And then I felt like a whole new self in a way. And so thank you
Yeah.
for explaining that a little bit more about the different wounds too, because I think if you don't know about it, if you don't have the terms, it's hard to explain what you're going through
Yeah.
don't if you don't know that it is actually very normal.
Yeah. My gosh. Even that last sentence that you touched on there, that it is normal and that we in our society, we've been so forcibly and intelligently disconnected from other women. We've
Yes.
been, so divided in our connections with other women and in sacred sisterhood to the point where we don't understand or hold these conversations with other women because we have been so taught by society that women to women connection is unsafe and that sisterhood is something that is to be feared. So because of that, it feels so easy for us as women to hold all of that in the womb close to the chest and not express what we're going through and not understand that other women are going through, albeit in their own unique ways, very similar circumstances that we have. And if we all, were able to come together to rally with one another, to share our voices, uplift one another and hold one another in our experiences, in our wounding, in our shame, in our pain, our anger, our grief, we would understand that it's completely normal. I traced the ley lines of another wound, the sisterhood wound, back thousands upon thousands of years, prior to the rise of patriarchal control, which we see really heavily rise into power and the defamation of women occur around the time of the rise of Judeo-Christianity. Prior to that, in Mesopotamian culture, in places like Samaria and Babylon and all of these beautiful ancient places, we see cultures where women quite literally held each other in such reverence and respect. They healed together, they cried together, they bled together. Women would, take their child, and if they had to go out and, go hunt for the day, because it's not widely known that women were actually hunters for their communities. They also stood in places of power and they were priestesses of the sacred goddess temples and all of these beautiful, amazing things. They were head of household and they also held the wealth for their communities. It's just incredible what women did that we've been taught to forget. But, when women would go out to hunt or to go to the temples or whatnot, they would hand their newborn baby off to their sister to be nursed by their sister because they trusted her that much, like the women of their community that much. And we've just been so taught that sisterhood and conditioned through media and patriarchal, society to believe that, we as women are better off separate. And it's so false. When we come together and we remind each other of who we are, that we hold this sacred power in our womb, our sacral chakra, that our anger is sacred, and that we are beautiful divine goddesses in our own rights and in our own embodiments, and that when we let our body's wisdom flow and we express our authenticity and our creative innate expression, and we share our medicine with the world, that when we come together in sisterhood and remind one another of these things, there's so much healing that happens. And that is something that I'm seeing on the rise in our world today. We're living in such vital, crucial, pivotal times in the world where we're finally seeing that reclamation of the feminine, the reclamation and rise of sisterhood, the reclamation of women rallying together to reignite that sacred flame of the feminine within one another's hearts. I truly believe that everybody in society, whether male, female, non-gender conforming, whatever you identify as, that we are all these beautiful sacred mirrors of one another. So when one woman allows herself to be vulnerably seen in her anger, in her pain, in her expression, that shows another woman and gives another woman permission to do the same for herself and to realize, wow, hey, I'm not the only one that is experiencing these emotions. It's safe for me to allow myself to feel them and express them and to heal them. And it's safe for me to, step into this connection with this woman to do that as well. It truly makes me so excited for the future of what society can be as we step back, but also step into a new of these sacred ways of sisterhood and of women's power. It's beautiful.
It is so beautiful. I just have all these feels when as we're chatting about this stuff because it's just so incredible. And I do think, and something that you and I chatted about before, the patriarchy knew what they were doing by pitting us against each other because
Oh
the
yeah.
power that women have when they support each other and when we're not competing, it's phenomenal. And when you
Yeah.
have a group of people, women that you connect with and that you genuinely support each other through the good times and the bad. So even if you're successful and one is not, they're still rooting for you because they are genuinely happy for you. That
Hmm.
means the world. And one group that I really have always admired, I love the power that Black women hold in
Oh yeah.
owning themselves and speaking up and being
Yeah.
confident and owning their shit. I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
love
I
it.
and I have always admired and just thought how beautiful that is. And I know sometimes they get the angry Black woman, and I hate that because it's not angry. They're just being honest and they're being assertive. And
Yeah.
I think so many of us have been conditioned to not be that way. And I am always clapping my hands for them because wow. And it gives permission that I like how you're doing that. You're not disrupting anything. You're just being open and honest. And that's powerful. It drives away the people that it should. It brings in the people that it should and want that kind of community too, that kind of
Yeah.
self ownership. I think it's so powerful. I know you mentioned that you have community and women's circle. Do you want to share a little bit more about that for folks maybe who are interested in joining a sisterhood of
Yeah.
sorts?
Yeah, so my community is Wisdom Weavers, and the name in and of itself describes the intention of the community. The community is centered around bringing women together to rally with one another, to heal that sacred wound of sisterhood that we all have held as women within society, that conditioning that has taught us that we are meant to heal and to do life separately. We're coming together and we're in that community rallying with one another, and we are letting ourselves heal out loud, and we're uplifting one another, we're sharing our stories, and the intention of the community, the sacred flow of the community is every single month we move through talking about and covering different aspects of those core feminine wounds that we as women hold. For instance, this past month we have been talking about the sisterhood wound, where we've been coming together and we've been unpacking that wound, the origins of it, the why behind it, how it presents itself within us and within society around us, and then also how to heal that wound from a very real, hands-on, embodied perspective. And every month we move through a different wound. Next month we're going to be moving through the witch wound, and then the mother wound, and womb healing, and embodiment wounds, and abundance wounds, and just all of these different things that we as women have, struggled with in our lives for centuries and centuries and centuries. And we're coming together to do it, and we're healing out loud. Within that community, we also have a women's circle that we step into, where at the end of the month, after that month's focus, all the healing work that we've done, all of the open conversations centered around that wound within the community, we come together in that circle and we release that wound and we let it go. And we allow ourselves to open up in that space in such a sacred way. I feel like it's so beautiful and intimate, those circles, because we come out of very non face to face conversation, the kind of behind the scenes text conversation. We come out of that and we come together face to face, where we're able to actually hold one another as much as we can in a virtual setting, hold one another, energetically, emotionally, and let the other women and the sisters of that community be seen and held and felt and loved on and supported within that circle. And so that's absolutely, I would say, probably one of my most favorite parts of the community, if I'm being biased. But the community itself, it's new. I started it, created it about a month ago, but already since then there has been just such monumental healing that's been happening. Women are coming into that space and they're sharing things with the other women and with that community that they have mentioned that they haven't even spoken on or shared with anyone else in their lives. And I just think that there is something so powerful in that, finally letting yourself just open up and bare your heart and let your heart be fully seen. And I just think it's absolutely incredible. So that's the work that I'm doing within my community. And every day I wake up and I have a gratitude practice where I express gratitude for everything that I'm grateful for in my life. And one of the first things that I express my gratitude for is that community and the women that are being called into that community and that are already in that community, and just that beautiful sacred healing that we're doing, because it truly is, when we come together in sisterhood and we heal alongside of one another, we create such powerful ripple effects that ripple out into the world around us. And those ripple effects impact all of society and bring this world back into a place of healing. And it's absolutely incredible. I'm so grateful to be able to do that work.
Yeah, I love that you are doing that. And there's also something to be said. It's 111 right now, actually, as I just said that. But it's something to be said about
Love
the
it.
power of talking to almost strangers, because
Yeah.
sometimes I've been seeing this a lot, especially on threads where people are saying, clap for me or cheer for me or here's something I'm sharing, because nobody in my personal life is supporting it or understands it or knows it. But then they get this validation from total strangers who are
Yeah.
rallying for them and cheering them on. You can go and remove the mask because there's no preconceived ideas about you. I don't know you from anything. We have no shared history that we are aware of, and you can go and be vulnerable and open and not have to worry about necessarily running into each other at the grocery store. And so there's this freedom almost, especially if it's something that we're not always comfortable with right away. And so there's this
Yeah.
kind of freedom of being able to go and just be and
Yeah.
be honest and open and in a like-minded community of people who are there for the same thing. So you're not weird or the outcast. We're all here for that same thing. And
Yeah.
we all want to provide that for each other. And there's, like you said, the uplifting and just so much positive energy and support there. I can only imagine how healing that is, especially for people who tend to be more of the nurturers, to be nurtured back.
Mhm.
And that has to feel so cozy is the best word that I can think of right now, is just to have that. So I love that you offer that.
I love that. Thank you. I agree with that so wholeheartedly. It's so easy for us to just, yeah, not feel able to be open with those that are closest in proximity physically around us, especially, a lot of the times it's especially hard. And I've had to move through so much healing with it surrounding allowing myself to be open with my family, especially. I feel like it's been really hard for me to be open in my healing with them, because a lot of the wounding that I've been experiencing comes from those early relationships of my life. And so being able to come into a space where strangers turn into sisters through being held and received and loved on and supported in such sacred ways, it's something that I wish every woman can experience. I think every woman is deserving and worthy of it. I feel that we as society are seeing more and more of these women's circles and sisterhood communities popping up. And I hope that growth can continue across the world. It's so powerful. It
Yes.
truly is.
It is. And you're right about the family part. It's There's no shame or blame, but it is often wounds that
Yeah,
they're passing down because through no fault of their own, that's just what they know. That's what was shared with them. That's what they knew. That's what they passed. And you healing will, like you said, help them to heal a bit as well. But if you are going through it right away, there tends to be some defensiveness when you bring things up because they're
absolutely.
not in the same space to see it the way that you're seeing it. So it's nothing against you. Just keep that in mind. But that is why it's so great to have this external group and community that there are no tied feelings or emotions or situations there. You can go and be as
Yeah,
open and vulnerable as you want, and there's no need to feel like you have to put a caveat in there or any
yeah,
kind of disclaimer when I say this. So it's so freeing to be able to do that. So Ash, I know we're
absolutely.
running up on time. Is there anything else that you want to share before I ask how people can find you?
I don't think so. I feel that this was such a beautiful, liberating conversation, and I am truly just so grateful to you for offering me the space to be able to, come here and share my story and my voice and to allow myself to be seen and held and received. And it's something that I feel is so healing for me, being able to just come into this space with you, as that has been a big wound that I've struggled with, just allowing myself to be held and received and seen. And so this has been such a healing experience for me. I'm very grateful to you for that. And I truly just am in awe at the work that you are doing and the platform that you're holding for people to come and commune with one another and be fully seen and held. And so thank you for your gifts and your medicine and for this space. So
Thank you.
I'm grateful.
I am very grateful. Thank you so much. And for anybody who wants to work with you, wants to join your community or follow you and learn all the wonderful things that you're doing, how can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram and TikTok. My name is the same. It's Ash underscore the self healer. And you can just simply go to the link in my bio. I've got my website there. I've got all of my offerings, my community, access to my community, and or a message on Instagram or TikTok is beautiful as well too. And I would love to be able to commune with anyone who it resonates within their heart. Too. I'm sorry if you can hear this. My cat is in the background
I
crying,
do.
but
I know. I love, obviously, I love animals so much. Hi, kitty.
yes, anyone who wishes to come together, to commune together, to be held, or to just have conversation, my door is open on both of those platforms always.
Awesome. And as always, I will link that. But I also want to second that as far as the communication and just conversation part. You were doing some research. You talked about like Mesopotamia and Mary Magdalene and different
Yeah.
things. In that short time that we were chatting, I was very blown away by how much you have researched and that you know. And it was all very fascinating information. If you're not necessarily looking for a space to be held and nurtured, you just want to learn more about this, it's some powerful, impressive stuff. I would highly recommend connecting with Ash online. And for somebody who does channel, and I know you're a fantastic oracle and you have held so much space for so many others, I am really glad that I was able to provide even a little bit of that for you today. So thank you so much for the kind words. I, as I mentioned, was very honored to have you join me and am very grateful for what you have shared to help me grow in what I'm trying to do. But I think I can speak for a lot of folks that have found comfort in what you are providing, that I'm sure they are going to love to hear more about you and get a chance to see you versus you giving to everybody else. So thank you for your time
Thank
today and for all of this wonderful wisdom that you are weaving. See what I did there?
Thank you. I love that. That was beautiful. Perfect. Thank you so much, Erica. It was truly a treat. And I'm so grateful to you for all of those words and just so much love and so much reverence for you. Absolutely.
I got you. And I know that you know how highly I think of you. So thank you so much. All right.
Of course.
This episode of Stumbling Forward was brought to you by Ori Ara's Self Care Collective. Real women, real lives, and real self care. It's empowering you to take care of yourself one day at a time. If you are interested in joining the Self Care Collective, there are discount codes on the screen. Stumbling Forward member will get you 20% off your first month's membership, or the Stumbling Forward founder will get you 20% off a lifetime membership.